High school football, Alabama's Before the Game, presented by Northeast Orthopedics. Coming up tonight, we're going to preview every game in East Alabama, including a couple of big playoff rematches from 2022 and a number of measuring stick games across East Alabama. That plus Pitts Pick'ems. It's all coming up on Before the Game, presented by Northeast Orthopedics. High school football, Alabama's Before the Game. Brought to you by Northeast Orthopedics on Football Thursday night. John Holder, Tommy Wood with you. We are going to preview every game in East Alabama coming up, plus Pitts Pick'ems presented by Big Woody's Tires. A lot of big games coming up. It's going to be one of the biggest weeks of the season in high school football. And Tommy, none bigger than the Battle of Highway 9. It's a marquee matchup at the Field of Champions in Piedmont tomorrow night. Number 3 Piedmont taking on number 2 Cherokee County, number 3 in 3A, number 2 in 4A. After Cherokee County's 48-14 win over Alexandria last week, people have been asking me, Tommy, is Cherokee County that good? And my answer has been, yes, they are indeed that good. But the question is about the Piedmont Bulldogs. They've got a lot of changes there, and this is their official opener, so we've got a lot of questions to be answered in this game tomorrow night.
Of course, one of the most successful quarterbacks in the history of the state of Alabama, Jack Hayes, has graduated, so a new quarterback comes in there. Also, the new coach, Jonathan Miller. That era begins in earnest, and a big matchup taking on Cherokee County.
That will be one of the big games that we'll have for you after the game tomorrow night. The highlights of that game from the Field of Champions in Piedmont. Well, last year, Tommy, the White Plains Wildcats, they felt like they could have and probably should have won at home against Oak Grove. Now they have a chance for redemption. There's a loss last week, a tough loss to Ranburne. They're back on the road again, traveling to Jefferson County to face Oak Grove. Blake Jennings trying to find win number 1, not only of the season, but of his career.
Everybody I've talked to said that White Plains played very well last week, losing that late in the game, 31-28 to Ranburne, which is a tough place to play. And again, a big loss there. But they move on, going to Oak Grove. Oak Grove only 4-6 last year, but one of those wins against White Plains.
One of the kind of mystery teams around here is the Pleasant Valley Raiders. They played in a jamboree last week with Collinsville and Hoax Bluff. Now they're going on the road to play the Donahoe Falcons. They had their way with Donahoe last year out in the Valley, winning 34-15. Now they travel to Lynchfield at Donahoe for a matchup with the Falcons, who of course lost to Weaver 40-13. Kind of a mystery team here with Pleasant Valley in 2023.
Well, you've not seen them out in a real game. I mean, last week was Jamboree, but offensively, not exactly what they were hoping for. Unable to really get some offense going on track, so that's going to be a big matchup. And you look on the other side, Donahoe did give up 40 points last week against Weaver. So a chance there for Pleasant Valley to get on track. Donahoe, a chance to grab that first win at home.
Yeah, the first quarter was disastrous for Donahoe last week against Weaver. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong for the Falcons in that game. Well, tonight, coming up tomorrow night, I should say, we've got a huge matchup. It's the home opener for the Oxford Yellow Jackets at Lamar Field in Oxford. Tommy, we talked last week, if Oxford could go to McCalla and beat McAdory, it could set the tone for the entire season. Tommy, I think right now Oxford is in great shape to maybe start this season at 4-0. Huntsville, Huffman, Shades Valley coming up. If they can win tomorrow, I think they may be 4-0 heading into the Pinson Valley game in Week 5.
Well, and you talk about Oxford, they're going to, again, have that great environment tomorrow night as they notice all the changes that have taken place in the last several months there with the facilities. They're going to be fired up and ready to go. And Mims and Nick Robertson last week really on the same page. 4 touchdowns. I think Oxford is really flying high right now. They've got a lot of confidence taking on a Huntsville team that went 6-5 last year.
Absolutely. Oxford kind of flipped the script from last year to this year in that matchup with McAdory last Friday night down in McCalla. This is one of the huge matchups coming up. Namath Pitts has got a tough task coming up in picking this game right here. Walter Welborn and Ohatchee on the hill at Walter Welborn. Welborn looked very good against Anniston. The offensive line at Welborn is as good as you're going to find in 3A. They are as advertised. Ohatchee, a huge win over Sachs last week, 32-8 on the Creek Bank. This is not a region game as it normally is. It's a non-region matchup. But this game, Tommy, might be over with at about 8:30, the way these two teams run the football, even though last week Ohatchee showed they can throw the football with Robertson at quarterback.
They've also got Nate Jones, 155 yards last week, and that win over Sachs, several big plays there. On the other side, as you said, Welborn's offensive line really did a great job with Anniston last week. They were in that game pretty much throughout until the Jaden Lewis appeared, and all of a sudden the game changed. But again, I look at Welborn. They're a strong team. Going to be a great matchup tomorrow night.
Well, Ohatchee was decimated by injuries when they played Welborn last year out on the Creek Bank, and Welborn had their way with Ohatchee, winning that game 45-7. We expect a much closer game on the Hill coming up tomorrow night. We talked about 2 games in East Alabama that were going to be playoff rematches from last year. Playoff rematches. This is one of those. One of the top games in the state, regardless of classification, Tommy. Number 1 and defending Class 4A state champion Andalusia playing host to number 7 Anniston. Anniston needed a game. Andalusia needed a game. They said, why don't we play this? So Anniston is headed to the heart of South Alabama to Andalusia, a battle of Bulldogs once again. Tommy, everyone knows the storyline of this game. Last year, Anniston dominating, to be honest with you, Andalusia 21-0 until late in the third quarter. Andalusia brought it back, had a punt return to win the game at the end of the game. Heartbreaking loss for Anniston, 35-28. The Anniston fans felt like they should have not only won that game, but won the Class 4A state championship, as Andalusia went on to do. So speaking with Anniston's football team yesterday, as we presented an award to them, we'll have more about that on the game, after the game tomorrow night. This is a hungry football team looking for redemption at Andalusia tomorrow night.
How long do you think it took to circle this date on the calendar for the Anniston Bulldogs? Because, as you said, they felt like last year they should have won that game and made a run at the 4A title. Andalusia comes from behind in a game that was just very bizarre, and it's kind of like all the wheels came off for Anniston. So I know that they're ready to get a shot at Andalusia again. Andalusia has some of the best facilities you're going to find in the state of Alabama. So when you go down there, it's going to be an absolutely tough place to play. They are, again, a very hostile environment there. But, again, I go back to Jaden J. Money Lewis, and last week he scored about every way imaginable. And that athleticism right there should bode well for Anniston as they go on the road, try to get a big win over a tough Andalusia squad.
First home game ever for Coach Alfonso Freeney and the Sachs High School Wildcats coming up on Friday night at Jack Stewart Field at Sachs. They have number 8 Sylvania coming in. Now, Sylvania has not played. This will be their opener. They beat Sachs last year up at Sylvania, 19-6. This is a team that lost one starter off a team that went to the state semifinals, lost to Piedmont in the North Alabama championship game. They're number 8 in the state in the preseason poll. A lot of folks think Sylvania needs to be higher. Sachs had a lot of mistakes. Coach Freeney was on our show with after the game last week. He talked about the tackling, that they needed to clean that up. But Sachs opening up with Ohatchee on the road. Then you come home and take on a Sylvania team, Tommy, that a lot of folks think might go to the Super 7 this year.
Oh, they're going to be really good, and that's going to be a tough matchup again at Sachs. But I always make the best and most improvements between week 1 and week 2. Working on tackling, you saw some of the things of Coach Freeney. I know he saw the things on film that they need to correct, and I'm sure they have really harped on those this week. So getting Sylvania under control is going to be tough defensively because Sachs gave up so many big plays last week, but they've got to find a way to get off the field on third down. Again, a good matchup there, but Sylvania is going to be a good ball team, but I think Sachs will be much improved this week.
Tommy, I have said for many years that currently, right now, the biggest rivalry in Calhoun County is this next game that we're going to talk about, but it's going to be an interesting game coming up. Number 6 in Class 4A, Jacksonville, big win on the road at Boaz last week. Alexandria, well documented, the big loss last week on the road at Cherokee County. These two rivals about 8 miles apart, meeting at the new Golden Eagle Stadium in Jacksonville. A lot of folks looking forward to seeing the new turf, the track, the new seating, everything new. What's not new is one of the best quarterbacks in this entire state in any class. Jim Ogle, I think, right around 250 yards passing last week against Boaz. Another tough road trip for Alexandria this week.
Well, and all I've heard about, you're talking about Jacksonville, they're worried about the offensive line. They replaced 5 starters. Zay English rushes for 200 yards last week. So, again, if they get that rushing attack going to go along with Ogle, Jacksonville is going to be a tough team to beat throughout this season. So it's going to be very interesting there. Coach, again, from Alexandria last week, made the comment he felt like his troops really didn't compete like he hoped they would. So, again, I'm sure they've had plenty of meetings on that this week, and I think you'll see a team from Alexandria comes out that's hungry as they go to Golden Eagle Stadium.
Speaking of rivalries, we don't have a lot of time to jump into why this is such a big rivalry, but trust me, it is. Weaver and Glencoe, over the years, they just don't like each other very much. Weaver travels to Glencoe. Glencoe, this is their home opener. Second year of Scott Martin as the head coach at Glencoe. Weaver, very impressive last week. Tommy had a chance to watch them play in person at Donahoe. This is a bigger, physical football team. Caden Gooden is, as advertised, as good as any football player in East Alabama. Weaver going to Glencoe. Interesting game coming up here. Boy, if Weaver can go in and win this game and go to 2-0, the sky may be the limit for what this Weaver football team can do, but Glencoe is going to be improved as well. You know that with Scott Martin. Big rival game here over at Glencoe.
A 2-0 start for Weaver. That would be the first time since 2018 that they started off the season 2-0. On the other side, you've got a Glencoe team that only won 2 games last year, but one of those was against Weaver. So an interesting matchup there. And, one thing we talked about last week, the discipline that is being instilled in this Weaver team. A penalty, you're going to do push-ups, and they do them during the game. I think that you're seeing a new Weaver program starting to turn that corner a little bit, so it's going to be a big game for the Bearcats this week.
We'll be hopping over at Wilson Darnell Field in Glencoe. Let's take a jog over to the east a little bit, but not really to the east. The team is to the east, but they're making a big trek west. Cleveland County Tigers going to Samantha. If you don't know where that is, that's close to Nick Saban's house on Lake Tuscaloosa in northern Tuscaloosa County. Last year, this is another one of those games that Cleveland County only lost 13-7, and at the time, Northside was state ranked. This is a game that Cleveland County, Tommy, could go in and win. And if they can start off the season with a W this year on the road, that would be big for Joby Burns and the Tigers.
Had a chance to see the Tigers play last week. They are a team that is so physical. They're a team that is plays so hard. It's just unbelievable the way they play. Jake Dingler, a linebacker, had 13 tackles, didn't play in the fourth quarter. He is all over the football field, had a great week last week. Northside, they are big. They're a physical team as well. This is another one of those games that is going to be really a war from start to finish.
Cleveland County in a jamboree last week down at Clay Central. I think this game, Tommy, is going to be one of the best games in all of East Alabama. Wadley and Ranburne. Wadley lost last year in their opener to Horseshoe Bend, only scored 6 points. They avenged that last week against Horseshoe Bend 35-7. Ranburne scored 31 points in that 31-28 win over White Plains. You know, Wadley last year offensively was tough out of the gates. They only scored 15 points in the first 3 games, including a shutout to Ranburne. Now Ranburne comes down to Wadley. I think this is going to be a really good football game.
Totally agree with you. As looking into this ball game, you got Cade Garrett, who's the quarterback for Ranburne, had 4 touchdowns last week, was really head and shoulders above everybody else athletically in that big win, 31-28 over White Plains. On the other side, Frisco Robertson of Wadley scored 2 touchdowns, also pulled in 2 interceptions.
Frisco, I love it. One of the great names of high school football players in East Alabama. Tommy, one of these next teams here that we're going to talk about, I think, is the most underrated team in the state in Class 3A. That's the Randolph County Tigers. And they get no respect in the polls. They did not play last week. This will be their opener, taking on a Woodland team who was very impressive against Victory Christian, winning 38-7. There's been a lot of buzz in the offseason, though, around Wedowee and how good this team can be. And I'm buying into the buzz. I think Pat Prestridge and this Randolph County team kind of sitting over there on the Georgia border, quietly. No one's talking about them. But I think this is a really good Class 3A football team.
You're talking about a Randolph County team that has defeated Woodland 9 straight times. Now, if you're not aware, these schools are about 4 miles apart. So it's a great rivalry. And again, Randolph County's had the best of them for the last several years. Woodland gave up a lot of yards in the Jamboree. They played a lot better last week against Victory Christian. But I'm with you. I think Randolph County is one of those sleeping giants right now that we're going to see as the season goes on get better and better.
Well, these two teams are not sleeping giants. This game may be one of the most entertaining games in the entire state for the whole year coming up. We got a huge game taking place down at Wright Field in Roanoke, number 8 in Class 4A, and I think that's way too low, against the number 1 team in 3A and defending state champion St. James. KJ Jackson, great quarterback at St. James. Hanley has a great quarterback as well. Last year, Hanley went to Montgomery and won 48-35, won a shootout. I don't know that Hanley's offense is that explosive this time, but this game is going to be one of the best games in the state of Alabama, I think, in any classification this week.
Totally agree with you. And you talk about Hanley. Again, their strength is their offensive and defensive fronts. Now, they're going to be faced with a quarterback, that's going to be very good as they come in there. And, again, it's going to be a great matchup there. But a win at Hanley is tough to come by. So no matter who you are, it's going to be tough, but that's going to be a great game.
Great game coming up. Tommy, you'll be at this next game that's coming up, and this is always an entertaining game, always two quality teams and two quality programs. Ben Russell at the Sportsplex taking on Central of Clay County. The opener officially for Central of Clay County, Ben Russell. Whew, really impressive, blowing out Wetumpka last week.
Yeah, they're a very explosive offense. They've got more talent on the outside than most teams that you're going to see. This is probably one of the best teams that Benjamin Russell has in several years. I mean, the way that they've got talent, especially on the perimeter. Got Malcolm Simmons. He's an Auburn commit. He is explosive. He is athletic. He's 6'4" and can touch the top of the goalpost, I think. But he is an incredible talent. Gabe Benton, the quarterback. I was talking to some of the folks from Alex City the other day. I said, football-wise, I don't see a lot of offers and a lot of interest there. They're expecting him to try to make a Major League Baseball. That's how good, talented this guy is. So going to be very interesting there to see how this next few months for him. That young man is an incredible talent. Clay Central, a lot of folks say they struggle taking on Cleburne County, but it's also one of those that when you look at a Danny Horn coach team, the summer leading in, there's never a lot of buzz. When they play a jamboree, there always seems to be a slight struggle. They've got some to get answered, but I think you'll see a much improved team for Clay Central this week. But again, Benjamin Russell is one of the top 6A teams, and I honestly feel like they may have a chance to run the table.
Well, we talked last week a lot about Sylacauga and how confident they were. That confidence did not result in a victory last week as they went on the road to Birmingham to take on the Winona Dragons in that game over in Birmingham. And, now the schedule doesn't get any easier now, because now you've got the Moody Blue Devils coming to town, and that is going to be a tall task for the Sylacauga Aggies as they try to get win number 1 in the 2023 campaign.
Well, if you're Coach Chris Smelly and you really, have that reputation of offense, that's usually what you focus on. That's usually the way that his teams go. Last week for Sylacauga, not really able to get anything going against Winona as they fall in that game. So that's going to be something that I'm sure they're trying to rectify this week going in. And on the other hand, you've got Moody with a big win, very emotional win over Pell City last week, a big rivalry there. So again, the Blue Devils coming in highly ranked, and they're going to be, again, a very tough team to get.
Moody had quite a scare last week in that game with Pell City. They're kind of looking for redemption, trying to have a better showing against Sylacauga. Last week at this time, I'm not sure this next game, Tommy, was one that we kind of thought was going to be a big matchup. But now, after Childersburg goes and beats Munford at Munford, and they came from behind to do it, they were down and came back and scored the last 14 points of the game. Suddenly, Childersburg comes home to John Cox Stadium. Number 2 B.B. Comer comes to town. This is now a lot more interesting game, to be quite honest, than it was a week ago.
That's exactly right. I mean, the expectation for Childersburg really not that great, but after last week's win, they came out and played very good football against Munford. So to get that win there sets pretty much a bullseye on this game right here. This could be a huge program win if Childersburg can get by B.B. Comer. Staying
in southern Talladega County, we've got a matchup that, didn't know a lot about Verbena, to be honest with you, but Verbena last week, a loss at the hands of Central of Coosa, and now they come in to play Fayetteville at Farm Links Field. This will be Fayetteville's home opener for John Limbaugh and his team down there. I think it's an excellent opportunity for Fayetteville to get off to a good start in 2023.
I think you're right. I saw a little bit of that Verbena game, and defensively they were just not able to chase down running backs. Coosa Central able to break off several long runs. Speed was the issue for Verbena, and I think Fayetteville, as you said, I think they've got a good shot here.
All right, this is another interesting game coming up. The Winterboro Bulldogs basically put on a good show last week. They beat Cedar Bluff 33-7 after losing a close game to them last year. But it gets a lot tougher for Winterboro now. They travel across the river to take on number 7 Vincent. Vincent a winner over Raglan last week. Vincent had an outstanding season last year. Looks like they're going to be strong again. But what about Coach Skylar Mansfield in Winterboro? Impressive showing last week. They could really shock the 2A world with a win at Vincent.
Yeah, last week kind of opened up some eyes. This would open up all the eyes if they can get the win over Vincent, because Vincent has won 12 of their last 14 games. But I looked at it. Skylar Mansfield's got this team playing well.
We come northward into Talladega County as we start looking at some of the teams in North Talladega County and what's going on there. We've got some matchups that we're going to look at there. One of those is not going to happen tonight. Alabama School for the Deaf and Tennessee School for the Deaf were supposed to play in Knoxville tonight. Circumstances beyond their control. That is what we understand. This game has been canceled. So we'll move on from the Tennessee School for the Deaf and ASD, and we'll stay in Talladega, and we'll talk about some games coming up. Lincoln and Asheville. That's the next game coming up. The Lincoln Golden Bears at home against the Asheville Bulldogs as we stay in northern Talladega County. This is a Lincoln team at solid win at Talladega last week, 31-7. Asheville gave up a lot of points to St. Clair County, but they scored a lot of points as they lost that game 41-24. But you got to feel like Lincoln is probably the favorite in this game. Looks like it's shaping up to be a good season for Matt Zedeker and the Golden Bears.
Yeah, I think last week was a very impressive win over Talladega. I will talk about Jonathan Beeson for Asheville. He had over 200 yards, a couple of scores last week. So again, as you said, Asheville able to put up the points last week. They just couldn't slow down the opponent defensively. So it'll be interesting to see if they can make that a little better here in week. We'll call it week 2. It's actually week 1, but it's going to be interesting for Asheville if they can get that defense on track.
We're only halfway through previewing all the games in East Alabama and the big games around the state. More games to preview coming up. Northeast Orthopedics, let me tell you about some new things going on with them. They are now in Jacksonville. They have a new location at 800 Pelham Road South, and they are now providing athletic services to Jacksonville High School and Jacksonville State University. All the Jacksonville State University athletes now coming into Northeast Orthopedics in their brand new facility. They just opened that up a few weeks ago there on Pelham Road South in Jacksonville. Go to northeastorthopedics.com. Northeast Orthopedics, keeping you in motion. When we come back, we'll preview more games as Before the Game rolls on a football Thursday night presented by Northeast Orthopedics.
Whether you're cheering for your team or chasing a personal fitness goal, nothing is more frustrating than an injury that keeps you from the things you love. At Northeast Orthopedics, we understand that life is constantly moving, and we are committed to making sure you keep moving as well. No matter your orthopedic need, Northeast Orthopedics has you covered with 6 convenient locations and 7 highly skilled surgeons. Visit us at northeastorthopedics.com for more information. Northeast Orthopedics, keeping you in motion.
Dedication to the people of this area and involvement in the issues that matter most to his constituents. These are the characteristics of State Representative Randy Wood. Randy was a small business owner for almost 4 decades. He's a member of the Weaver Lions Club, Fraternal Order of Police, and served 6 years in the Alabama National Guard. State Representative Randy Wood, proudly serving the people of District 36 since 2002.
High school football, Alabama's Before the Game, presented by Northeast Orthopedics. John Holder, Tommy Wood with you on this football Thursday night. EAN News. If you're looking for local news in East Alabama, this is your source for all the local news. Go to Facebook, go to YouTube, search for EAN News. It is all the news, the weather, the sports. We've got a fantastic group of talented professionals. Maybe not me, but I'm the weather guy on there. You can check out our weather forecast. And then we've got great news, wonderful news from all across East Alabama, positive news in your community. Mike Stedham, Katie Edwards bringing you the news, and of course Chase Robinson with all the local sports. And I'll be there doing the weather, EAN News, every evening. Check us out on Facebook and YouTube. Tommy, let's jump right back in and talk about another game that maybe last week didn't seem like it would be interesting. But Leeds lost last week, major upset to Mortimer Jordan, and Pell City almost shocked the world and went in and beat a top 10 ranked Moody. They were very close. That game was back and forth, back and forth. They fell 28-24. But all of a sudden, this looks like a winnable game now in Rush Propst's home debut at Pete Rich Alumni Stadium in Pell City.
You know, if you survey all the coaches in the state of Alabama about moral victories, Rush Propst would be the one loudest thing, and they don't count. But I tell you, a lot of Pell City fans felt great last week as they really took to Moody and played very well in losing that game late. Leeds, A tough loss to Mortimer Jordan last week, and right now I'm with you. I think this is the big game at Pell City. I think they're going to pack this place out. They're going to pack the Pete. It's going to be a great crowd there, a very tough environment for Leeds to go into.
Another Pell City team, Victory Christian, over in the Eden area of Pell City. They're at home against Whitesburg Christian. Whitesburg had a big win last week. Victory Christian had a big loss last week. An interesting last name as the head football coach at Victory Christian, trying to get his first win of the 2023 season.
Coach Etheridge has done a great job at different places, getting the opportunity here with Victory Christian. Kind of got the job late, still getting his adjustments in place. And one thing that last week that really Victory Christian struggled with was penalties. And that's something you see early in the season. And I think for Victory Christian to get a win, they're going to have to straighten that out.
This is another one of those games that last week at this time didn't seem like a game at all that anyone would be interested in. But that was before Mortimer Jordan went and beat Leeds. That was before the Springville Tigers beat the Etowah Blue Devils. When you start talking about beating those kind of teams, you get people's attention, and now you've got Springville 1-0, Mortimer Jordan 1-0 over in Morris. This is shaping up to be, hey, whoever wins this game is going to be 2-0, and I don't know if anybody thought either one of these teams would be 2-0 to start the 23 campaign.
And it's not been that long ago that Mortimer Jordan was a team that really was a tough opponent in Class 5A. So I think that that's one of those programs that's kind of went through some hard times, really starting to get back on track, and that's going to be a fun one.
Tyler Robinson at St. Clair County, they have things kind of going over there. Had a big win over arch rival Asheville last week, scored 41 points in doing so. They're 1-0 as they go to the corner of Jefferson County to take on the corner Yellow Jackets. Again, St. Clair County's in a position where they could actually start 2-0, and it has been a long time since the Saints have been 2-0, but if they can go still one at corner, and I think they probably can, they could be 2-0.
Corner has not lost to St. Clair County since 2007, so they want to make sure that streak stays intact as they, again, take a tough St. Clair County team on tomorrow night.
One of the most consistent teams in Class 2A Region 6 over the last several years has been the Southeastern Mustangs. This is a game going on tonight. It's a Thursday night game at Joan Ford Stadium in Raglan. It's the opener for Southeastern. Raglan, a tough loss, but I understand they look pretty good, even though they lost to a top 10 ranked Vincent team 29-20 last week. Southeastern, though, has been maybe the most consistent team in 2A Region 6. The program is really solid, so I think a pretty good matchup tonight at Joan Ford Stadium in Raglan.
Yeah, Southeastern didn't play last week. They're coming off a 10-2 season last year. A lot of players coming back on that team, so they're going to be confident as they come in and take on this team. It's going to be very interesting.
Another county rivalry game coming up that involves two teams that really need a win. Sandrock and Cedar Bluff playing at the Rock. The Rock had a tough loss to Spring Garden at home last week. Cedar Bluff went on the road, lost that big game to Winterboro. Two Cherokee County rivals who have been playing each other forever, I guess as long as they've been playing football in Cherokee County. Look at that series record. Tied 33-33. 33 wins for Sandrock, 33 wins for Cedar Bluff. That is an important game for those two communities up at the Rock at Russell Jacobway Stadium.
And you talk about tradition a few minutes ago, about winning tradition and being consistent. Sandrock has not started a season 0-2 since 2006, and that was one time in many years. So again, Sandrock has always been one of those teams that they are going to get off to a pretty good start. It's going to be a great matchup tomorrow night, and both of them really need to win.
We mentioned that there were two games that were playoff rematches from last year, Anniston and Andalusia. This one right here, Tommy, is the other one, and this is just as big. Number 6 Spring Garden in 1A playing host to Coosa Christian, who was a Hail Mary pass away from being in the Super 7. Now, Coosa lost last week at a really good 3A Geraldine team, 26-0. Spring Garden won last week at Sandrock, as we mentioned. Last year, when they played in this same week at Gadsden, Spring Garden had their way with Coosa Christian, winning 27-0, dominated them. The way the brackets shook out, they played each other in a rematch in round 2 at Spring Garden. Spring Garden had the lead most of that game, but Coosa Christian, all the credit in the world. They come back, they win the game, kick a field goal at the end, and up in Spring Garden in what was then a major upset, 31-28. Now these two teams, again, they're both loaded again. It's the top game in the state in Class 1A, no doubt about it. And I think another one of the best games in any classification in Alabama. Both these teams are motivated at Spring Garden tomorrow night.
You know, that's another one. When you mention these two teams getting together, you know it's going to be well worth the admission price. Looking forward to this. Coosa Christian last week, shut out. That's something you don't hardly say. They are going to be out there trying to get some points on the board. Spring Garden shuts them out last year. Again, two very good football teams going head to head.
Rolling into Etowah County now. Got a lot of big games taking place in Etowah County. Gaston 1-0. Allen Beckett goes up and wins at Asbury last week. Appalachian lost to Locust Fork, but Locust Fork is the favorite in that 2A Region 6 we talked about. Appalachian, as I understand, has about 19 seniors. A lot of great athletes on this team. So it'll be interesting to see what Gaston can do. Appalachian blew them out last year big time up on the mountain. We'll see what happens at Shinbone Ridge tomorrow night.
You know, Allen Beckett has not been there long enough for his coffee to get cold, and all of a sudden he's out there on the field and gets his first win. Last week, Appalachian gives up 61 points, so defense has got to be the focus this week. But I tell you, the way that Gaston's playing, it's going to be tough to get a win.
Gaston scored 34 last week, and they only didn't even have a head football coach until the first week in August when practice was already underway. So it'll be an interesting game to watch. Another big Thursday night game. This is one that we will be at, and it's always a packed house. Looking forward to it. Southside and Hoax Bluff. Head coach of the Hoax Bluff Eagles, Mike Robertson, will join us tomorrow night on After the Game live in studio. Hoax Bluff, pretty good in their jamboree with Collinsville and Pleasant Valley last week. Southside lost on a goal line stand. Guntersville shut them down. There were 4 shots inside the 10, and give Guntersville all the credit. They kept Southside out of the end zone, and Guntersville won the game 14-10. But this is a very good Southside team. But I think that this is a very good Hoax Bluff team. A lot of folks think this may be the best Hoax Bluff team that Coach Rob has had in 6 or 7 years.
You know, I love these old traditional games, these rivalries. They first met in 1937. That is a long time ago they've been playing football. And, you know, you look at Southside, they've won 3 straight over Hoax Bluff. But like you said, I think Hoax Bluff right now has been looking forward to this game for a long time.
Yeah, 42-7 last year at the Bluff. You know that Hoax Bluff is looking for redemption in that big rival game over at Smoke Neck Tech at Southside. Now, Barney Hood Stadium will be hopping out. We'll be out there covering that game for you. All the highlights coming up tomorrow night on After the Game. Gadsden City. Measuring stick. We talked about some measuring stick games. This is one of those measuring stick games because last year Gadsden City lost big to Carrollton, Georgia. This year they won big against Carver Montgomery last week, 37-20. But last year they lost at Hewitt-Trussville, Tommy, 64-17. So how much progress has Gadsden City made? We're going to find out. Number 8 team in 7A, Hewitt-Trussville, coming to Titan Stadium.
How big of a win would this be for Gadsden City to get this win right here? TJ Worthy last week, 4 touchdowns for the Titans. Hewitt-Trussville coming in. That's one of those that's going to be a signature win if you can get that, and folks all around the state will all of a sudden start looking at Gadsden City another way. One of the more surprising scores last week we alluded to earlier was Springville beating Etowah 28-21. Etowah's at home opener over at Jim Glover Field in Attala, taking on Fort Payne, who beat Etowah last year. Fort Payne, a little bit of a shock last week, a wild game. They lost 56-51 to Scottsboro in the Battle of the Top Cat Trophy. And so both of these teams looking for a little redemption. I think everyone thought probably Fort Payne and Etowah would both be 1-0 instead of 0-1 here. This is another, I think, a measuring stick game. Neither one of these teams can really afford to go to 0-2 to start this season. Yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure on both teams to try to get this first win. And like you said, when you talk about Fort Payne giving up 56 points, and they've got a lot of questions on the defensive side of the football. Etowah, tough loss last week. I looked for them to be much improved this week too. Well, this is going to be a big rival game. I call the Hoax Bluff Piedmont game when they play each other the Battle of 278 East. This is the Battle of 278 West. Susan Moore and West End on 278, only about 6 miles apart. Susan Moore 0-1 after that loss, 20-0 last week to Douglas. West End, well, very impressive, 48-0 winners over Galesville. We talked about Derek Sewell. He feels like that they have turned the corner, got a great program out at West End. 2 big rival games. Be an emotional game out there at Susan Moore. Coach Patterson, his dad, talk about pressure. Pod Patterson, Larry Patterson, the legendary coach. His dad's name is on the field at Susan Moore. Now he's the head coach at Susan Moore, so there's a lot of emotion with this game. And then you throw in the big rivalry. This could be an interesting game over in Sneed. West End last week scored a lot of points. They get the shutout win. Susan Moore unable to get points on the board. So you see both sides have really got to find some way to generate offense if you're Susan Moore. Defensively, you got to find a way to come into this ball game and make some stops. So again, a very interesting matchup there.
Was there a new head coach in the state who had a better debut than B.J. Brooks at Sardis? I mean, goodness gracious. He was first game as a head football coach and his first game at Sardis. And they win the game 60-6 last week at DAR. Now they go to New Hope. New Hope beat Sardis last year. Can Sardis turn the tables? Right now, the Lions, all that momentum from baseball season has kind of carried over, it looks like, now to football. And Sardis is on a roll right now.
And quarterback Brian Chapman can get it done for Sardis. 5 touchdowns last week in that win. Again, a great aerial assault for the Sardis Lions.
We've got some top 10 matchups across the state. Not only some top 10 matchups here in East Alabama, but some top 10 matchups across the state. One of these, interesting to me, number 1-5 and defending state champion in 2A at home against number 10 Geraldine. If you go back a couple years ago, Geraldine is the team that ended the longest winning streak in the country at the time in beating Fife. Fife blew them out last year and got their revenge. But I think this is one of the better matchups in the state in any classification. Big rivals there in DeKalb County. Packed house, Fife and Geraldine.
There will be folks hanging on this score all night long because, like I said, Geraldine really opened the eyes last week with that win over Coosa Christian. Fife, of course, perennial powerhouse, and everybody knows, especially in Clay County, by the way, what happened a couple of years ago when that streak ended. But again, those two teams really get after one another, so that is going to be a very interesting game that a lot of folks will have an eye on.
Well, we start with the smaller classifications and go to the larger classifications as we look at top 10 matchups across the state. So there's a 2A, 3A. Here's a 2A, 2A right here, I guess you would say. Number 9 Ariton, who actually lost last week, taking on the Highland Home Flying Squadron. This game last year at Highland Home was one of the best games played in the state last year in any classification. So a top 10 2A battle in the Wiregrass.
Yeah, last year, Highland Home able to get that win 44-28. Tough game there, but like you said, Ariton is one of those teams. They continue to come back year after year, and going to be a very interesting matchup tomorrow night at Ariton.
Two of my favorite nicknames. Purple Cats Flying Squadron at Zumstein Stadium in downtown Ariton, Alabama, coming up tomorrow night. We continue looking at top 10 matchups across the state. There's a lot of buzz about the Jackson Aggies. Jackson is a team that a lot of folks think might win 4A this year, but they've got a matchup coming up, Highway 43. That's a revered highway in high school football in East Alabama, coming up to take on number 9 Demopolis, who was both teams very, very impressive. Jackson had a jamboree game last week. Demopolis now 1-0. Two great programs, tradition-rich programs in West Alabama.
You know, you talk about Jackson. They have not had a losing season since 1994. I mean, they are consistent. Every year it seems like you're looking at them in the top 10, then you get the playoffs, and they make a run deep in the playoffs. So the Jackson Aggies are a team that can do, every year it just seems like they are right in the thick of things. And on the other side, you've got Demopolis. They've won several straight over Jackson, and they're going to remind them.
Talking about Southwest Alabama, Tommy Wood, you know, there's a creek that runs through Bruton, Alabama called Murder Creek. And of course, in Mobile, we all know about Mobile Bay, both bodies of water that are famous in this state. And I don't know this for a fact, but I think the waters of both of those places are probably blue because these two schools right here are blue bloods. It doesn't get any bluer than T.R. Miller and UMS Wright Prep playing in Bruton. T.R. Miller's 1-0, had that overtime win against Hillcrest Evergreen. UMS Wright lost the Battle of Oak Shell Road to their arch rival St. Paul's 14-7. But when you start talking about T.R. Miller and UMS, T.R. Miller number 9 in Class 4A, UMS number 6 in Class 5A. These are the bluest of blue bloods, I promise you, in high school football in this state.
And these two, this series is tied 16 apiece too.
Wow.
So again, very evenly matched. And when you talk about high school football in the state of Alabama and you mention either of these names, people know exactly who you're talking about because these two programs really were one of those teams that really set the bar so high years ago, and they continue to live up to it every year.
Going to be a great game down in Bruton tomorrow night. Southwest Alabama football at its finest. Moving on, taking a look at top 10 matchups. Hey, this is a big one right here. This is number 1 defending state champion in 5A Ramsey taking on number 4 A.H. Parker, 2 inner city Birmingham teams. Both teams 1-0. Ramsey number 1 in 5A, Parker number 4 in 6A. Of course, Parker got on the map last year by shocking Clay Chalkville in the first round of the 6A playoffs. That's a great inner city Birmingham matchup coming up tomorrow.
That Parker defense is absolutely loaded. They have got more stars than the Milky Way. They've got all kinds of 5-star players, especially in the secondary. Pretty much every secondary player that they have for Parker is a 3, 4, or 5-star. So I look at Parker's defense being very strong, but when you talk about Ramsey, they won it all last year. They've been there, done that. Again, another tremendous matchup here in the early season.
We keep rising from the smaller schools to the larger schools in the state as we start taking a look at top 10 matchups in Alabama. Here's one that, on the face of it, you're thinking, what? Mary Montgomery, who's having the greatest football success I think that they've ever had. They're out in Sims in northern Mobile County. Number 9 team in 7A, hosting the number 2 team in 5A, the state runner-up from a year ago, the Charles Henderson Trojans. A lot of buzz coming from my friends in Mobile about the Vikings of Mary Montgomery.
Yeah, trying to go 2-0 for the first time in a very long time. But like you said, there's a lot of buzz about Mary Montgomery. But on the other side, Charles Henderson, if you've not looked at their schedule, 6 road games to open up the season. A very strange schedule there for the Trojans.
And again, we continue to look at some of these top 10 matchups around the state. Here's a big one right here. This is a region game, actually. Region play starting early because I think this is a 9-team region in Class 7A Region 2. Number 2 Auburn at home at Duck Sanford Stadium in Auburn, hosting number 5 Enterprise. Brian Blackman got that program rolling now down at Enterprise. Both teams coming in 1-0. Both teams very impressive last week. Should be a great matchup for, I guess, the early lead in Class 7A Region 2.
You know, and when you get to playing those region games so early in the season, you've got to be hitting on all cylinders early. Auburn looks good, but again, that Enterprise program continues to get better, and they are gaining ground there in 7A.
Well, we want to spotlight a couple of more games here in East Alabama to wind up, and then we'll have every game in East Alabama. Jacksonville Christian, 3-0. That's not a misprint. They've already played 3 games, and they have been so impressive. Traveling to take on Tabernacle in Gardendale. Tabernacle has not played a game yet, so Jacksonville certainly has the experience factor. I was at that game last year when they played in Jacksonville. Jacksonville Christian won that game. It was a great football game, 44-40 in 8-man football. And I think this is great nicknames. The Jacksonville Christian Thunder and the Tabernacle Torches in Gardendale tomorrow. Tommy Miller and the Thunder have a chance to go to 4-0.
Well, and you look at the first 3 weeks for JCA, they score over 50 points in the first 2. Last week they struggled a little bit and only scored 48. But again, the offense is really rolling. In 8-man football, you've got to have a great offense to win games. Tabernacle, that's a program in 8-man football that has been around for a long time. But again, I like the way JCA is playing.
Remember the name Noah Lee. We're going to keep telling you that name throughout the year. Sophomore quarterback, already getting looks from SEC schools at Jacksonville Christian. One more game, and then we'll be done as far as this segment goes, previewing all the games in East Alabama. That's a game that was added. Collinsville had Crossville. Crossville not having a football team this year, so they're looking for a game. They called their old friends from Galesville over in Cherokee County and said, Galesville had an open date. You want to play? And indeed they did. Coach Brian Knapp was telling me that he asked his team, hey, y'all want to play Collinsville? And his Galesville Trojans team said they do. This is an old rivalry. They have played 45 times through the years. Back when Collinsville was a 1A school, they basically were in the same area with each other. So longtime rivals here, Collinsville and Galesville. Collinsville's opening game, they played in that jamboree with Hoax Bluff and Pleasant Valley last week. A lot of good buzz about Ernie Willingham and Collinsville. Galesville and Brian Knapp trying to get it on track after a blowout loss last week to West End.
You know, if you're both of those teams and you know how often they've played in the past, you have no problem scheduling this game because, again, that's something that's such a tradition in that area. So, again, hats off to both of those 2 schools for coming up with a way to play.
Absolutely. Well, we've previewed every game in East Alabama for you, but there's a lot more coming up. We're going to preview some special things that we have coming up on after the game and some things we're doing here at High School Football Alabama. And Namath Pits and Pits Pick'ems presented by Big Woody's Tires. He's got a tough job this week. 10 tough games to pick. All of that is coming up as we roll on this Football Thursday night before the game presented by Northeast Orthopedics.
Whether you're cheering for your team or chasing a personal fitness goal, nothing is more frustrating than an injury that keeps you from the things you love. At Northeast Orthopedics, we understand that life is constantly moving, and we are committed to making sure you keep moving as well. No matter your orthopedic need, Northeast Orthopedics has you covered with 6 convenient locations and 7 highly skilled surgeons. Visit us at northeastorthopedics.com for more information. Northeast Orthopedics, keeping you in motion.
Dedication to the people of this area and involvement in the issues that matter most to his constituents. These are the characteristics of State Representative Randy Wood. Randy was a small business owner for almost 4 decades. He's a member of the Weaver Lions Club, Fraternal Order of Police, and served 6 years in the Alabama National Guard. State Representative Randy Wood, proudly serving the people of District 36 since 2002.
If you live, if you work, or if you're a student in Calhoun, Etowah, Cherokee, DeKalb, or Marshall counties, you can be a member of Alabama Teachers Credit Union. A great, phenomenal credit union here in East Alabama. Wonderful folks. By the way, their rates are phenomenal. I can attest to that personally. You're looking for a car loan, any kind of loan, they got joyful rates. They're jumping for joy with the rates that they have at Alabama Teachers Credit Union, atcu.com. You can go to that and check out Alabama Teachers Credit Union, bringing you before the game. And they also on Friday nights and after the game bring you our ATCU bottom line with all the scores on football Friday nights from across East Alabama. John Holder, Tommy Wood back with you on this football Thursday night on Before the Game, High School Football Alabama, presented by Northeast Orthopedics. Tommy, our magazine has been out for a little over a week now, our High School Football Alabama, the magazine, and 96 pages. And look, there's the cover story, Steve Smith, Westbrook Christian. You've also got my top 10 and Super 7 picks, previews of over 40 teams in East Alabama. You were a major part of writing that big story on Jim and Jimmy Ogle of Jacksonville, a coach's wife story. That's up now. And a story that you wrote and did a fantastic job, the 3 C's, Central, Clay County, 3 C's of success, about the consolidation of that program years ago. And that story is up now as well.
Yeah, we've had a lot of comments about that. I've gotten a lot of messages about how much they enjoyed it because a lot of folks in Clay County, for example, have been a part of it. Either the Clay Bowl for years to come or for years ago, and then again this Clay Central program that they're invested in now. So a lot of positive comments. I appreciate that. It was really fun talking to some guys that were inside that locker room when they combined, when they practiced for the first time, and find out how it all happened. It was really a great time to do.
Go to facebook.com. You can also go that really an easy way to do is go to our website, highschoolfootballalabama.com. Right there on the opening page, there'll be a link where you can click on, and they'll take you to the magazine, and you can sit there at your desk, on your laptop, on your tablet, on your phone, and you don't have to go pick one up. Don't have to worry about them running out. It's all right there, and you can just sit there and scroll and read all the stories, all the previews, get all the information, schedules, week-by-week schedules, all of that in our High School Football Alabama, the magazine, brought to you by the Calhoun County Commission. High School Football Alabama's After the Game, 10 o'clock tomorrow night live on Facebook and YouTube. And Tommy, going to have some big announcements coming up tomorrow. But the big thing is, want to tell folks that we're going to have highlights of all the big games across East Alabama. Head coach of the Westbrook Christian Warriors, Steve Smith, will be live in studio. He's a future Hall of Fame coach. A current Hall of Fame coach is Mike Robertson of the Hoax Bluff Eagles. He will be with us live in studio tomorrow. Plus, we'll have scores, highlights, all kinds of high school football information for 2 hours plus tomorrow night.
Hey, if you're a high school football fan, there's nothing better than coming home and catching out what's going on after the game. Again, you see the highlights, you keep up with all the scores, region breakdowns. There's so much information. And if you're a high school football fan, like most of us are, then this is the place to be.
Team of the Week, we've got our Ted's Floors and Beyond Team of the Week. They get the Anniston Orthopedic Score shirts. And let me just tell you, we were over at Westbrook Christian today. They were our Week 1 Ted's Floors and Beyond Team of the Week, presenting those score shirts. And you're going to see that. You're going to see that presentation to Coach Steve Smith and the Westbrook Christian Warriors after their 42-27 win over St. John Paul II. So we'll have all that for you tomorrow night, and you can check that out along with Coach Smith. And also, Tommy, we're going to announce tomorrow our very first, we'll keep this a little bit secret, our very first player of the game presented by Farmers and Merchants Bank.
And man, they get some great merchandise and well represented. And I'm going to tell you, if you can find a player of the game last week, there were so many great performances in our area. You know you did a great job if you were named the player of the week.
Farmers and Merchants Player of the Week, they receive a plaque from Farmers and Merchants Bank. And also this year, really cool, they get a jersey from Team Sports, and that is personalized. And we'll make that announcement and show you that jersey and show you the first winner coming up tomorrow night on After the Game. And of course, we have our Young Oil Grub Mart Muscle Team. We'll make that first announcement of the 2023 season and a whole lot more coming up on After the Game tomorrow night. Tommy, thank you so much for being with us. We're about to bring Namath Pitts in for Pitts Pick'ems presented by Big Woody's Tires. We'll see you back here next Thursday night as we preview all the games in East Alabama.
Looking forward to it. And again, I can't wait to see these picks, because this week's slate of picks, he's going to step where no man wants to go before.
Tommy Wood with us on Before the Game, presented by Northeast Orthopedics. Back in just a moment.
Whether you're cheering for your team or chasing a personal fitness goal, nothing is more frustrating than an injury that keeps you from the things you love. At Northeast Orthopedics, we understand that life is constantly moving, and we are committed to making sure you keep moving as well. No matter your orthopedic need, Northeast Orthopedics has you covered with 6 convenient locations and 7 highly skilled surgeons. Visit us at northeastorthopedics.com for more information. Northeast Orthopedics, keeping you in motion.
Dedication to the people of this area and involvement in the issues that matter most to his constituents. These are the characteristics of State Representative Randy Wood. Randy was a small business owner for almost 4 decades. He's a member of the Weaver Lions Club, Fraternal Order of Police, and served 6 years in the Alabama National Guard. State Representative Randy Wood, proudly serving the people of District 36 since 2002.
High school football, Alabama before the game, presented by Northeast Orthopedics. Rolling on this football Thursday night. John Holder now with Namath Pitts. Pitts Pick'ems is coming up, presented by Big Woody's Tires. And Namath, last week we always pick 10 games. We have 9 local games, 1 statewide game to pick. Last week he was pretty confident, and he did okay. There it is, 7-3. What do you think about 7-3 for the first week?
I think I could have been better. I think that's a typo. I'm pretty sure I went 10-0. I don't know where they got the 7. Okay, but there were some tough games that I went out on the edge. Coosa Christian obviously being one that bit me in the butt there. Carver Montgomery, that one hurt me as well. But I'll take 7-3 to start the season.
Well, let's see if he can do better or worse this week. We're going to break this up into a couple of segments, 10 games. We're going to hit the first 5 right now, presented by Big Woody's Tires. Here's the first one. We're going to start off with a statewide game this week, and that is the game between defending Class 2A state champion, the Fife Red Devils, taking on their big DeKalb County rival, top 10 team in Class 3A, the Geraldine Bulldogs, Long Ridgeway Stadium there at Paul Benefield Stadium over in Fife.
Yeah, I owe an apology to the Geraldine community, so let me go ahead and get that out of the way to start tonight's show. If there's a team that can go into Fife and defeat them, it's a team that's done it before, and that's Geraldine. Carlos Mann at running back had a big showing last week. Jackson Culver at quarterback. But again, John, it all comes back to where this game is played at and who it's played against. And that's Fife and Paul Benefield's team. And I look at Logan Anderson, who's been an all-star player for Fife, and I just cannot pick against the Red Devils in this one. So I'm going with the home team. I'm going with the Fife Red Devils.
And that's the safe pick right there, picking Fife against Geraldine, but that promises to be a good game in DeKalb County. All right, game number 2 coming up as we go through our top 10 here. Whew, this is a huge one. Big rival. Battle of Highway 9. Piedmont Bulldogs, number 3 in Class 3A, Cherokee County, number 2 in 4A. The Battle of Highway 9. They'll be hanging from the trees on the west side of Piedmont coming up tomorrow night. High school football, Alabama will be there for all the highlights. We know what Cherokee County is about as we talked with Tommy, though, in previewing this game. Piedmont, a bit of a mystery team. New coach, new quarterback, a lot of new players. Lost 22 seniors off the team last year. I don't know what to think about this. What say you on the pick?
Well, let's try it this time again this week. Cornejo. Did I get it right this time?
Corneo.
Cornejo?
Corneo.
Cornejo?
Corneo.
I give up. But either way, he's the real deal running the ball for Cherokee County. You've got Tittle that took over at quarterback in dominating fashion last week against Alexandria. And I'll be honest with you, Jack Hayes, he's gone. Steve Smith, they're gone. It's a new era at Piedmont with Coach Jonathan Miller and Cole Wilson at quarterback. But I got to be honest with you, John, a lot of what Cherokee County did last week, I'm expecting it to be the same against Piedmont this week. I'm going with Cherokee County.
Cherokee County was dominated by Piedmont for the better part of a decade, and now Namath Pitt says the Warriors are going to put 2 in a row on the Piedmont Bulldogs. All right, game number 3 in Pitt's Pick'ems presented by Big Woody's Tires. Wow, what a marquee matchup here. Hanley, number 8 in the state. I think that's too low in Class 4A. At home at Wright Field in Roanoke against number 1 defending state champion St. James. And it all begins with one of the best quarterbacks in the state in any class, K.J. Jackson.
And I've seen K.J. Jackson up front and personal last year in the playoffs. I don't know if you remember, John, but I came in this studio and said, John, St. James has the best quarterback and best wide receivers I've seen in lower division football in the state of Alabama. And he's back, and he's got as many weapons this year. But, again, they've got to go on the road to a Hanley team that did beat them last year. Now, you talked a little bit earlier, maybe not as much offensive firepower for Hanley this year, but Cannon Kyles is back at quarterback, E.J. Goss at running back, and simply Larry Strain. Now, I know Neil Posey is going to do a good job at St. James. There's no questions about that. But I don't pick against Larry Strain. I hardly ever do it, and I'm not starting tonight. I'm going with the Hanley Tigers.
Namath Pitt says down goes number 1. St. James of Montgomery comes to Roanoke and goes down to the Hanley Tigers. So says Namath. All right, that's Namath's pick. All right, let's go to number 4 right here. This was maybe not an interesting game a week ago, but after Leeds lost to Mortimer Jordan in an upset, and after Pell City came that close to upsetting Moody, now it's the home opener at Pete Rich Alumni Stadium in Pell City, packing the Pete. Rush Propst making his debut in Pell City against the Leeds Green Wave. This promises to be a huge rivalry in years to come. They're already calling this the I-20 series. Pell City and Leeds. What do you think?
I got to tell you, I was very surprised to see that Leeds had lost to Mortimer Jordan last week. Now, I know it's only week 0, and I know Rush Propst, if anybody doesn't believe in moral victories, it's Rush Propst. But I believe that last week was a moral victory for Pell City to play Moody, who's a really good team, my favorite to win this region, and to really have had that game won late and lost it. I felt like Pell City did a lot last week. They showed me a lot. And not just because they made articles this week, I think Pell City is going to play with a chip on their shoulder. And I really think they're going to beat the Leeds Green Wave and win their home opener of the Rush Propst era.
Namath Pitt's rolling with Rush Propst and Pell City. Namath says, you Leeds Green Wave fans, he says that tomorrow night you're going to be 0-2 by about 10:30 tomorrow night. So we'll see what happens there. Our last game in this segment, a game that we'll be at later on tonight, Smoke Net Tech at Southside Barney Hood Stadium. Southside and Hoax Bluff, huge traditional opening game. It's not the opener for Southside this year, but it is the opener for Hoax Bluff.
Yeah, Hoax Bluff's going to be a very improved team this year. I think Mike Robertson's team just slowly not being talked about per usual. Everybody's talking about Piedmont and Geraldine and Sylvania and all these other teams, and he's got a really improved team that he feels really good about, John. But I look at 5A versus 3A, and I always feel like this makes a difference. And you may go, well, you picked Geraldine. I mean, you picked Coosa Christian over Geraldine last week, 3A, 1A. Yeah, but we're talking 5A, and we're talking the depth that Southside is going to have compared to Hoax Bluff. Naismith at quarterback. My first trip to Southside ever, and I hope it's a Southside win. That's my pick.
Going to be an outstanding high school football atmosphere. Hoax Bluff head coach Mike Robertson will be with us live here tomorrow night on After the Game. So if the Bluff goes in and pulls off the win, you'll have to answer to Coach Rob right here live in person tomorrow evening. Tell us about Big Woody's Tires. A lot of good things going on with Big Woody's Tires in Anniston.
Yeah, Big Woody's Tires is a great company, family-owned, family-oriented, ran by family, been serving your family since 1987. I actually had an issue earlier today with my car, took it up to Big Woody's Tires. They had me in and out in 10 minutes, John. 10 minutes in and out. They got fast, convenient service with the best prices, new and used tires. They have the capability to fix bent and cracked rims, repair tires. They do minor brake jobs. A lot of different things can be done at Big Woody's Tires. That's on Highway 202 in Anniston. It's the Orange and Black Shop. It's the Orange and Black Shop, and Gary Woodard is the owner. I'm telling you, you won't be disappointed if you go see them yourself.
All right, Big Woody's Tires bringing you Pitts Pick'ems, and we'll continue the next 5 picks, the last 5 picks from Namath Pitts, coming up in just a moment as high school football Alabama's Before the Game rolls on, presented by Northeast Orthopedics.
Whether you're cheering for your team or chasing a personal fitness goal, nothing is more frustrating than an injury that keeps you from the things you love. At Northeast Orthopedics, we understand that life is constantly moving, and we are committed to making sure you keep moving as well. No matter your orthopedic need, Northeast Orthopedics has you covered with 6 convenient locations and 7 highly skilled surgeons. Visit us at northeastorthopedics.com for more information. Northeast Orthopedics, keeping you in motion.
Dedication to the people of this area and involvement in the issues that matter most to his constituents. These are the characteristics of State Representative Randy Wood. Randy was a small business owner for almost 4 decades. He's a member of the Weaver Lions Club, Fraternal Order of Police, and served 6 years in the Alabama National Guard. State Representative Randy Wood, proudly serving the people of District 36 since 2002.
State Representative Randy Wood out of District 36, proud supporter of high school athletics and bringing you the Before the Game program. He is honest, he's dedicated, he's hardworking. And the issues that matter to you in District 36 here in East Alabama, what those issues are to you and important as they are to you, they are equally or even more important to State Representative Randy Wood. State Representative Randy Wood out of District 36 bringing you Before the Game here on High School Football Alabama on a Thursday night, presented by Northeast Orthopedics. Time to continue now with Pitts Pick'ems with Namath Pitts, as that's presented by Big Woody's Tires. This game right here might be as tough a game as there is to pick. You got Wadley and Ranburne, both teams 1-0, playing down at Wadley. Ranburne shut Wadley out last year. Wadley looking for some redemption. Both teams impressive in week 1.
Yeah, look at Wadley. Jaquez Wilkes, who is a very big running back. I think that's going to be the key for Wadley if they're going to win this game. For Ranburne, they have a lot of momentum after last week's game, getting a nail-biting win over White Plains. I think this game's going to be close, but I'm going with the lower classification here. I'm going with 1A Wadley.
He's picking the Bulldogs against the Bulldogs. Wadley against Ranburne, going with a 1A team. So he says Ranburne's going to go 1-1, and Wadley's going to be 2-0. We'll see what happens on that one. Next game coming up is a big rival game, believe it or not, going back a lot of years between Glencoe and the Weaver Bearcats. This is the opener for Glencoe. This is game number 2 for the Weaver Bearcats. Weaver very impressive last week. You and I both saw Weaver last week, and I'm telling you folks, this is a different Weaver football team than the last several years. Weaver going into Wilson Darnell Field in Glencoe.
Yeah, Weaver was a much more disciplined team than they were a year ago when I saw them last week, excuse me. Quarterback Caden Gooden, of course, everybody knows about him. He's got an offer from Marshall. But they also rotated another quarterback, so they've shown that they have depth in certain positions. Now, one of the things that Scott Martin praised at Glencoe more than anything at Media Day was the depth that they built this year, getting guys to come out that hadn't played football before. But I think it comes down to, we know what Scott Martin's going to want to do. He's going to want to just run the ball right at them. And I think it comes down to who can create more explosive plays, and I think Weaver does that.
Namath Pitts going with the Weaver Bearcats to go to 2-0 and going on the road for the second week in a row to win at Glencoe. These next 2 games coming up, I don't envy you. I don't envy you at all having to pick a winner of these next 3 games actually coming up. These are 3 hard ones, okay? On the Hill, Walter Wellborn and Ohatchee. We saw both teams play in person last week. This game might be over with about 8:26, the way they run the ball. Even though Ohatchee, as we mentioned with Tom, even though with Ohatchee, they can throw the football. This is not a region game anymore, but it's a big rival game in Calhoun County. On the Hill, Ohatchee and Walter Wellborn.
Let me start off by saying happy birthday to the head coach of the Ohatchee Indians, Coach Finley. Happy birthday to you, buddy. I'm just going to go ahead and get that out of the way before I get to the next part.
You're going to do that before you pick against him?
Before I pick against them. So I'm going to go ahead and wish him a happy birthday. Still hope y'all bring that Butterfinger cake up here one day this season. But needless to say, I was very impressed with Ohatchee last week. I thought they played really good against Sachs from what I saw. I mean, Jesse Baswell, we talked about earlier, Nate Jones. They got a lot of guys that are impact players that can run the ball. I think Ohatchee is going to be a really good team this year, as they were towards the end of last season. I got to be honest with you, I was surprised. I'm a Wellborn guy, but I was surprised. They are a big team, especially up front on both sides of the ball for 3A football. I was impressed by Jabari Williams. He really ran the ball hard. And when we pulled up to Anniston, John, they were giving them fits. I know they ultimately lost that game, but I think I was really impressed by what Wellborn did. And even after last week, I don't see myself picking against them again this season. And I'm going with my Wellborn Panthers.
Well, you got all your friends back at Wellborn, but you lost all the goodwill you had at Ohatchee with that pick right there. Be a great game. Highlights of that game coming up on after the game tomorrow night. This game, wow. Anniston and Andalusia, rematch of that quarterfinal game last year at Anniston that everybody from Anniston and probably even most of the folks from Andalusia will tell you Anniston should have won. A lot of folks feel like Anniston should have won the 4A title game. They're going to play each other now in the regular season down at Andalusia. A lot of key pieces still back for both teams in this game. Can the Bulldogs, Namath, in your opinion, the Anniston Bulldogs, go and beat the Andalusia Bulldogs in the heart of South Alabama?
Can they? Yes. Do I think they will? No. I'm going with Andalusia. Look, these next 2 games are 2 teams that are looking for revenge off playoff losses. I got to be honest with you. I look at Burnett, the running back for Andalusia. I saw Jabari Williams give Anniston's defense struggles. I can't imagine what Burnett's going to do to them personally. Now, Andalusia has a big task. Jaden Lewis, Gavin Doss, TK Downey. The list goes on of the playmakers for the Anniston Bulldogs. This is the game they have circled, but I think that trip to Andalusia, being this early in the season, I like Andalusia.
Let's just say that Namath picked the Bulldogs. Leave it at that. But he picked the Andalusia Bulldogs. Last game, Coosa Christian Spring Garden, another rematch from the playoffs last year. A shocker because Spring Garden dominated Coosa in the regular season 27-0 at Coosa. They come to Spring Garden. Spring Garden leads most of the game, but at the end, Coosa made that run, kicked the field goal at the end, shocked Spring Garden 31-28, rolled all the way to the state semifinals, and about that far from being in the state championship game. Most of the team is back at Coosa. Most of the team is back at Spring Garden. The game is back at Spring Garden again. We'll be at the game tomorrow night. Who are you going to make mad here, Coosa or Spring Garden?
Well, I hope this doesn't ruin me getting to try that steak sandwich that I've been waiting to try for years that everybody's been talking about. But I got to be honest with you, I originally had Spring Garden, but I'm going with Coosa Christian. I thought more on this. This is not a 3A playoff Geraldine team. Now, Spring Garden can be really good, but we're back in that 1A versus 1A. I know Spring Garden won this game in the regular season a year ago, but I just think Coosa Christian knows what's at the line here for Spring Garden, and I think John David Justice is going to make the plays. Cleto Bryant defensively, I think Coosa Christian wins this game on the road.
Well, I may need to wear my helmet in to Spring Garden tomorrow if I walk in with this guy. So you folks show us some grace out at Spring Garden.
Please.
Yes, please do that. Pitts Pick'ems with Namath Pitts presented by Big Woody's Tires. 7-3 last week. We'll see what this week
10-0
holds.
this week. Let's go.
All right. Namath Pitts with Pitts Pick'ems presented by Big Woody's Tires. That's going to wrap it up for another edition of Before the Game presented by Northeast Orthopedics. Join us tomorrow night at 10 p.m. live on Facebook and YouTube for High School Football Alabama's After the Game. See you tomorrow night.